sensation, a fabulous creation, a danceable solution to teenage revolution. Through the Strand, when you feel the love, it's the new way. That's why we say, do the Strand. Do it on the tables, wacky mistakes or mabels, slow and gentle, sentimental, all styles served here. Louis says he prefer laissez-faire run. Tired of the tango, fed up with fandango. Dance on moonbeams, slide on rainbow. In birds or blue jeans, you know what I mean. To the Strand. There we are. We opened with Roxy Music, Do the Strand. Because tonight we will be doing the Strand at the Nunkie Arms. Years ago, I can't remember where, probably in an Oxfam shop or something like that, I picked up this book, Strange Tales from the Strand. And it's a collection of strange tales from the Strand magazine. Now, the Strand magazine, probably most famous for publishing Sherlock Holmes. It was founded in 1891, and it kind of capitalized upon the boom for kind of short fiction magazines then at the time. Partly there was a demand for magazines, partly because of greater levels of literacy towards the end of the 19th century, but also the invention of the railways, the development of the railways. People needed something to do on those long journeys, and what better than to read about stories and curiosities and news and famous people. This is a bound volume of the Strand magazine from 1897. Again, I can't remember where I picked it up. And it begins, in fact, the whole volume serializes the second half of a volume of a novel by Arthur Conan Doyle called The Tragedy of the Korosko, which I did read a few years ago. It was reissued. And I seem to remember it's about Islamic terrorism. It's about some English travelers or Western European travelers, I think in Egypt or somewhere. And their ship is hijacked by extremists. And I remember it being very exciting. Anyway, but it is an interesting magazine. My favourite regular feature in it is of curiosities, simply called Curiosities. Here's a curiosity: the biggest potato on record. And this gentleman here, who is called Mr. J.B. Swan of Loveland, Colorado, with the biggest potato on record. There was another good one here. I was just flicking through it last night. Oh yeah. So I don't know what these are, but there's a kind of grotesque puppet type character there with the caption, "The Sentimental Dude." Now, I haven't yet read what the Sentimental Dude does. And that's the dude's consort. It's upside down. So there's lots of curiosities to be found in the pages of Strand magazine. And I think you can pick them up relatively easily in second-hand bookshops and so on, and on market stalls. I think I got that one on the Cambridge market stall, which is always good for that kind of thing. So who have we got in? Oh, hey, where are we? This is more people than usual. Matt in Dunfermline, hello there. Hi, Gary. Angie in Edinburgh. Stargaze Eternal in the East Riding of Yorkshire. Catherine Bowles, welcome. Dominic, good to see you again. Good. So a lot of regulars in, and if you're new to the Nunkie Arms, then heartiest welcomes. Last episode we did French stories, and I bought myself some Breton cider in a little micro bar in Birkdale, Southport. So I thought I enjoyed it so much I would have that again this time. But we're not doing French. We are doing very much English. As I said, we're doing Strange Tales from the Strand. Now, it's a very interesting book. It's full of forgotten authors, people that, for me, I'd never heard of before, as well as people like Arthur Conan Doyle and Edith Nesbit and H.G. Wells, and also some unexpected names like Graham Greene and D.H. Lawrence. But the first one that I'm going to read to you is by an author who I'd never heard of, J.B. Harris Burland. And I'll just read you the brief biography that the editor gives of him. So after winning the prestigious Newdigate Prize, which is a poetry prize at Oxford University, with a poem on the life and death of Amy Robsart, J.B. Harris Burland, 1870 to 1926, descended from the rarefied heights of literature to the more commercial planes of pulp. He was a prolific supplier of sensational fiction, titles such as The Curse of Cloud, 1914, Love the Criminal, 1907, and The Secret of Enoch's Seal, 1910, largely speak for themselves to down-market publishers like Greening and Everett. He also wrote socio-realist novels, Workers in Darkness, 1908, The Financier, 1906, touching on plutocratic conspiracies, some engaging fantasy adventures with a lost race theme, and tales of black magic and the weird. Lord Beadon's Motor is written in Harris Burland's most wild-eyed manner. And it is Lord Beadon's Motor that I'm going to read to you first of all tonight. This was published in the Strand in 1901. A hard man was Ralph Strang, 7th Earl of Beadon, 70 years of age on his last birthday, but still upright as a dart. Hair white as snow, but with the devilry of youth still sparkling in his keen dark eyes. He was indeed able to follow the hounds with the best of us, and there were few men, even among the youngest and the most hot-headed of our riders, who cared to follow him over all the jumps that he put his horse at. When I first came to Upstansay as a doctor, I thought it strange that so good a sportsman should be so unpopular. As a rule, man can do pretty well anything he likes in a sporting county as long as he rides straight to hounds. But before I'd been in the place a month, I attended him after a fall in the hunting field, and I saw that a man like that would always be unpopular, even if he gave all his goods to the poor and lived the life of St. Francis of Assisi. I mean, it's not that he was harsh or even unpleasant, but he had the knack of making one feel foolish and uncomfortable. And there was something in the expression of his eyes that made one unable to look him squarely in the face. His manners, indeed, were perfect, and he retained all the old world courtesies, but which seems to have been permanently abandoned by his generation. But I could not help feeling that underneath all his politeness and even his hospitality, there lay a solid substratum of contempt for his fellow man. Now, it was doubtless this impression which had earned him his unpopularity, because I never heard a single one of his enemies lay anything definite to his charge, beyond the fact that his elder brother had died in a lunatic asylum, and that Lord Beadon was in some vague way held responsible for this unfortunate event. But it was not, in fact, until Lord Beadon purchased a 12-horsepower Napier motor car that the villagers really began to consider him possessed of a devil. And certainly his spirit of devilry seemed to have found a worthy plaything in that grey mass of snorting machinery, which went through the lanes like a whirlwind, enveloped in a cloud of dust and scattering every living thing close back against the hedges as a steamer dashes the waves against the banks of a river. I'd often heard people whisper that he bore a charmed life in the hunting field, and that another and better man would have been killed years ago. And he certainly carried the same spirit of dash and foolhardiness, as well as the same good fortune, into a still more dangerous pursuit. It was the purchase of this car that brought me in closer contact with him. I have had some experiences of motors, and he was sufficiently humble to take some instruction from me, and also to let me accompany him on several occasions. Now, at first, I drove the car myself and tried to inculcate a certain amount of caution by example. But after the third lesson, he knew about as much as I did, and resigning the steering gear into his hands, I took my place by his side with some misgivings. I must confess that he handled the machine splendidly. The man had a wonderful nerve, and when an inch to one side or the other would probably have meant death, his keen eye never made a mistake, not once, and his hand on the wheel was always as steady as a rock. Now, this inspired confidence, and although the strain on my nerves was considerable, I found after a time a certain pleasurable excitement in these rides that I took with him. And it was excitement, I can promise you that. I mean, no 12 miles an hour for Lord Beadon, no precautionary breaks downhill, no wide curves for corners. He rode, as he did to hounds, straight and fast. I mean, sometimes we had 6 inches to spare, but never more than that. And as often as not, another half inch would have shot us both out of the car. We always seemed to come round a sharp corner on 2 wheels. And, well, it was exhilarating. But at the same time, there was something about it that I didn't like. You know, I don't think I was particularly afraid physically, but I did recall certain stories about Lord Beadon's mad exploits in the hunting field, and it almost seemed to me as though he might be purposefully riding for a fall at times. Then, all at once, my invitations to ride with him ceased. And I thought at first that perhaps I'd offended him, but I could think of no possible cause for offence. And besides, his manner towards me had not changed in any way. I dined with him more than once at Beadon Hall, where he was as courteous and irritating as usual. But he offered no explanation, and I certainly did not ask for one. I watched him narrowly when we talked about the motor, but he made no mystery about his rides. I noticed, however, that he did look older and more careworn, and that his dark eyes burned now with an almost unnatural brilliancy. I met him 2 or 3 times on the road, and I was going about my rounds in a trap, and he appeared to be driving his machine more furiously and fearlessly than ever. I was almost glad that his invitations had ceased. Strangely enough, I always encountered him on the same road, the one which led straight to Oxminster, which is a town about 20 miles away. One evening, however, late in August, when I was finishing my dinner in solitude, I heard a familiar hum and rattle along the road in the distance. In less than a minute, I saw the flash of bright lamps through my open window, and I heard the jar of a brake. There was a ring at the bell, and Lord Beadon was announced. "Good evening, Scott," he said, taking off his glasses. "Lovely night, isn't it? I wondered if you'd care to come for a ride." I thought he looked very pale, and he was covered with dust from head to foot. "A ride, Lord Beadon? Gosh, well, I hardly know what to say. Will you have coffee and a cigar?" Well, he nodded assent and sat down, so I poured him out some coffee, and I noticed that his hand shook as he raised the cup to his lips. But, well, I mean, driving a motor car at a rapid rate might easily produce that effect in anyone. So I handed him a cigar, and I lit one myself. "Rather late for a ride, isn't it?" I said. "Oh, no. No, he said, not a bit, not a bit. No, it's as bright as day out there, and the road's completely clear of traffic. Come on, it'll do you good. We can finish our cigars in the car. Well, yes, I replied, or the draft will finish them for us. Oh, look, all right, Scott, he said, look here. He was leaning over the table now and looking me straight in the eyes. I particularly want you to come with me. In fact, you must come, please, to oblige me. I want you to see something which I've seen. I'm a little doubtful as to its actual existence. Well, I looked at him sharply. His voice was cold and quiet, but his eyes, they were just a bit too bright. I mean, I should say that he was in a state of intense excitement, yet with all his nerves still well under control. I laughed a little uneasily. Oh, all right then, Lord Beadon, I replied, rising from my chair. But you'll excuse me for saying that I don't think you look very well tonight. Are you rather overdoing this motor business? I mean, it does shake the system up a good deal, you know. I'm not well, Scott, he said, but you can't cure me. Well, I said no more, and I left the room to put on my glasses and an overcoat. We set off through the village at about 10 miles an hour. It was a glorious night, and the moon shone clear in the sky, but I did notice a bank of heavy clouds in the west, and I thought it not unlikely that we should have a thunderstorm later on. The atmosphere had been suffocating all day, and it was only the motion of the car that created the cool and pleasant breeze which blew now against our faces. When we came to the church, we turned sharp to the right onto the Oxminster Road. It ran in a perfect straight white line for 3 miles, and then it began to wind and ascend the Oxbourne Hills, finally disappearing in the darkness of some woods which extend for nearly 5 miles over the summit in the direction of Oxminster itself. Where are we going, Lord Beadon? I said, settling myself into my seat. Oxminster, he replied. Please, now, Doctor, keep your eyes open and tell me if you see anything on the road. As he spoke, he pulled the lever farther towards him, and the great machine shot forward with a sudden plunge, which would have unseated me had I not been prepared for something of the sort. We quickly gathered up speed. Hedges and trees went past us like a flash. The dust whirled up into the moonlight like a silver cloud, and before 5 minutes had elapsed, we were at the foot of the hills and were tearing up the slope at the same terrific pace. As we ascended, the foliage began to thicken and close in upon us on either side, and then the moon disappeared, and only now our powerful lamps illuminated the darkness ahead of us. The car was a magnificent hill climber, but the gradient soon became so steep that the pace slackened to about 8 miles an hour. Lord Beadon had not spoken a word since he told me where we were going, but he'd kept his eyes steadily fixed on the broad circle of light in front of the car. I must say, I began to find the silence and the darkness rather oppressive, and to tell you the truth, I was not quite comfortable in my own mind about my companion's sanity. I took off my glasses and tried to pierce the darkness on either side. The moon filtered through the trees and made strange shadows in the depths of the woods, but there was nothing to be seen, and ahead of us there was only a white streak of road disappearing into blackness. Then suddenly my companion let go of the steering gear with one hand and clutched me by the arm. Listen, Scott, do you hear that? Well, I listened attentively, and at first I could hear nothing but the throb of the motor and a faint rustling among the trees as a slight breeze began to stir through the wood. But then I noticed that the beat of the piston was not quite the same as usual. It sounded jerky and irregular, faint and loud alternately, and I had an idea that it had considerably quickened in speed. Now, I can hear nothing, Lord Beadon, I replied, except that the engine does sound a little erratic. It oughtn't to make such a fuss over this hill. If you listen more carefully, he said, you'll understand. That sound you're hearing is the beat of 2 pistons, and one of them is some way off. Well, I listened again, and yes, he was right. There was another engine throbbing in the distance. I can't see any lights, though, I said, looking first in front of us and then in the darkness behind. But, well, I mean, it's just another motor, I suppose. It doesn't appear to be anything out of the way. He didn't reply, but he replaced his hand on the steering gear and peered anxiously ahead. I must say, I was now beginning to feel a bit worried about him. I mean, it was strange that he should get so excited about the presence of another motor car in the neighbourhood. And I was not reassured either when, in rearranging the rug about my legs, my hand brushed against his pocket and I felt what was undoubtedly a revolver. I began to regret coming. I mean, a revolver is not a necessary tool for the proper running of a motor car. We were nearly at the top of the hill now and still in the shadow of the trees. Now, the road here runs for more than a mile along the summit before it begins to descend. And halfway along the level, another road crosses it at right angles, leading one way down a steep slope towards Little Stanway and the other along the top of the Oxbourne Hills to Kelston and Rutherton, two small villages some miles away on the edge of the moors. We had scarcely reached the level when a few heavy drops of rain began to fall, and looking up, I saw that the moon was no longer visible through the branches overhead. A minute later, there was a low roll of thunder in the distance, and for an instant, the scenery ahead of us flashed bright and faded into darkness. I turned up the collar of my coat. The cart was now moving almost at full speed, but to my surprise, before we'd gone a quarter of a mile, Lord Beadon slowed it down and finally brought it to a stop with the brake. He appeared now to be listening attentively for something, but the wind and the pouring rain had begun to make an incessant noise among the trees, and the thunder had become more loud and continuous. I strained my own sense of hearing to the utmost, but I could hear nothing beyond the sounds of the elements. Sorry, what's the matter, Lord Beadon? I said impatiently. Are we going to stop here? Yes, he replied. Well, that is to say, if you have no objection. There is here a certain amount of shelter. Well, I drew a cigar out of my pocket, and after several attempts, I managed to light it. To be honest, I was in hope that we wouldn't go any further. The downward descent 3/4 of a mile ahead of us was about 1 in 10, and I did not feel much inclined to let my companion take me down a hill of that sort. Then for a few seconds, the rustling of the wind and pattering of the rain ceased among the trees, and once more I could distinctly hear the thud, thud, thud of an engine. I mean, it might have been a motor car, but it sounded to me more like the noise a traction engine, for instance, would make. As we listened, the sound came nearer and nearer and appeared to be on our left, still some distance down the hill. And then the storm broke out again with fresh fury, and we could hear nothing else. Lord Beadon pulled the lever towards him, and we ran slowly forward until we were within 30 yards of the crossroads, where he again brought the machine to a standstill. The noise had become much louder now, and was even audible over the roar of the wind and the rain. It certainly came from somewhere to our left. I looked down through the trees, and I thought I saw a faint red glow now, somewhere further down the hill. Lord Beadon saw it too, and he pointed at it with a trembling hand. Well, I don't. Looks like perhaps it's a fire in the wood, I said. I mean, I must say I did not much care what it was. Don't be a fool, he said. Can't you see it's moving? And he was right. It was moving. And in a few seconds, it was hidden by a thicker mass of foliage. It did not, however, seem to have anything particularly remarkable about it. I mean, it was evidently coming up the road to our left and was probably, well, I thought, a belated traction engine returning home from the reaping. I was more ever convinced now of my companion's insanity, and I wished very firmly that I was safe at home. I had half a mind to get out of the car and walk back. But he had by now managed to infect me with some of his own fear and excitement, and I must say I did not quite fancy being left with no swifter mode of progression than my feet. The thumping sound now came nearer and nearer, and as we heard it more distinctly, it was even more suggestive to my mind of a traction engine. And then I saw a red light through the trees, like the glow of a furnace, and then, not more than 50 yards away from us, my companion laid his left hand on the lever, and he stared intently at the corner. And then a very strange thing happened. I mean, whatever it was that had been lumbering slowly up the hill like a gigantic snail was suddenly shot across the road in front of us like a streak of smoke and flame. And through the trees to our right, I could see the red glow spinning up the road to Kelston at over 30 miles an hour. Almost simultaneously, Lord Beadon pulled down a lever and I instinctively clutched the seat with both hands. We shot forward, took the corner at about an inch to spare between us and the ditch, and we dashed along the road, now in hot pursuit. Now, the red glow had got at least a quarter of a mile's start, and I still could not see clearly what it was proceeding from. A flash of lightning, however, showed a dark mass flying before us in a cloud of smoke. It looked something like a large wagon with a chimney sticking out of it, and sparks streaked out of the back of it until they looked like the tail of a comet. What the deuce is it? I said. You'll see when we come up to it, said Lord Beadon. We'll go faster in a few minutes. We were, however, already going quite fast enough for me. And although I have ridden on many motor cars since, and occasionally at a greater speed, I shall never forget that manic ride along the Kelston Road. The powerful machine beneath us trembled as though it was going to fall to pieces. The rain lashed our faces like the thongs of a whip. The thunder almost deafened us. The lightning first blinded us with its flashes and then left us in more confusing darkness. And to crown it all, a dense volume of smoke poured from the machine in front and hid the light of our own lamps. I mean, it would be hard to imagine worse conditions for a motor ride, and a man who could keep a steady hand on the steering gear under circumstances like that was a man indeed. I would not have cared to try it myself, even in the daytime. But Lord Beadon's luck was with him still, and we moved as though guided by some unseen hand. Scott, he said after a moment, you'll find a small lever by your side. Pull it towards you until it gives a click. It's an invention of my own. Well, I found the handle, and following his instructions, I saw the arc of light from our lamps shoot another 50 yards ahead, leaving the ground immediately in front of us in darkness. We'd gained considerably. The light just now impinged on the streaming tail of sparks. At last, said Lord Beadon, he always has half a mile's start before, and the oil has given out before I could catch him, but he can't escape us now. But what is it, Lord Beadon? I'm glad that you see it. I thought before tonight it was a fancy of my own brain. Well, of course I can see it, I said. I'm not blind, but what is it? He didn't answer, but a flash of lightning showed me his face, and I did not repeat the question. Mile after mile we spun along the lonely country road, but never gaining another inch. We dashed through Kelston like a streak of light. It was fortunate that the inhabitants were all in bed. And then we shot out onto a road leading across the open moor, which stretches from here to the sea, 20 miles away. And I remember that 8 miles from Kelston, there was a deep descent into the valley of the Stour, and it was scarcely possible that we could there escape destruction. I quickly made up my mind to overpower Lord Beadon and gain control of the machine myself. And then we suddenly began to sweep down a long and gentle gradient. And second after second, our speed increased until the arc of light shone right on the machine ahead of us. And I saw now what manner of thing it was that we pursued. You would, I suppose, say it was a kind of motor car, but unlike anything that I'd ever laid eyes on before, and bearing no resemblance to a modern machine. I mean, it bore about as much resemblance to a car of today as a bone shaker of 20 years ago does to a modern bicycle. It appeared to be built of iron and was painted dead black. In the forepart of the structure, a 5-foot flywheel spun round at terrific speed, and various bars and beams moved rapidly backwards and forwards. The chimney that I'd seen was quite 10 feet in height, I saw now, and poured out this dense volume of smoke. On a small platform behind, railed in by a stout iron rail, stood a tall man with his back to us. His dark hair, which must have really reached his shoulders, was streaming behind him in the wind. And in each hand, he grasped a huge lever, and he was apparently gazing steadily into the darkness before him, although it seemed to me that he might just as well have shut his eyes, because the machine had no lamps, and the only light in the whole concern streamed from the half-open furnace door. And then, to my amazement, I saw the man take his hands off the levers and coolly proceed to shovel coal into the roaring fire. I held my breath, expecting to see the flying mass of iron shoot off the road and then turn head over heels down the sloping grass. But nothing happened. The machine apparently required no guidance, and it proceeded on its way as smoothly and swiftly as before. I took hold of my companion's arm now, and I called his attention to this strange circumstance, but he only laughed. "Yeah, well, look at the smoke," he said. "That's rather strange too." I looked up and I saw it pouring over our heads in a long straight cloud, but I didn't notice anything odd about it, and I told him so. "But can you smell it?" he continued. No, I sniffed, and then for the first time, I noticed there'd been no smell of the smoke, although in the earlier part of the journey we'd been half blinded by it. I began to feel very uncomfortable. "I think we should go back, Lord Beadon," I said, and I started reaching for the lever. "You will go back to perdition, Scott," he said. "If you meddle with me, we shall be smashed to pieces. We are now going 40 miles an hour, and if you distract my attention for a single instant, I won't answer for the consequences." And I must say, I felt the truth of what he said. I put my hand ostentatiously back in my pocket. It was quite evident that I couldn't interfere with him, and equally evident that if we went on as we were going now, we would be dashed to pieces. My only hope was that we should speedily accomplish whatever mad purpose Lord Beadon had in mind, although by now I began to think that he had no other object than suicide. Now, the Valley of the Star was only 2 miles off, but we'd been gaining inch by inch down the slope, and we were now not more than 30 yards from the machine in front of us. Showers of sparks whirled into our faces, and I kept one arm in front of my eyes, but I soon found that for some reason or other, these sparks did not burn my skin, and I was soon able to resume a more comfortable position and study the occupant of the car. I must say his figure seemed strangely familiar to me. I tried hard to recollect where before had I seen those square shoulders, those long, lean limbs. I wish that I could see the man's face, because I was quite certain that I'd recognize it. But he never looked back, and he appeared to be absolutely unconscious of our presence so close behind him. Nearer we crept, and still nearer, until our front wheels were no more than 10 feet from the platform. The glow of the furnace now bathed my companion's face in crimson light, and the figure of the man in front stood out like a demon toiling at the eternal fires. "Be careful, Lord Beadon," I said. "We shall be right in it." He turned to me with a smile, and I thought I saw the light of madness in his eyes. "Do you know what I'm going to do, Scott?" he said, putting his lips close to my ear. "I'm going to break it to bits. We have a little speed in hand yet, and when we get to the slope of the Star Valley, I shall break the cursed thing to bits." "For heaven's sake," I cried, "put the brake on, Lord Beadon. Are you mad?" And I gripped him by the arm, but he shook my hand off, and I clung to my seat with every muscle of my body strained to the utmost, because as I spoke, there was a flash of lightning, and I saw the road dipping. Far below, there was the gleam of water among dark trees, and on the height above, I glanced at a large building with spires and towers, and I idly called to mind that it was the Rockshire County Asylum. Our speed quickened horribly, and the car began to sway from side to side. I saw my companion pull the lever an inch nearer to him yet and grip the steering wheel with both hands. And then suddenly the road seemed to fall away beneath us. We sprang off the ground and dropped downwards and forwards like a stone flung from a precipice. We were going to smash clean through the machine in front of us. For 5 seconds, I held my breath, awaiting the awful crash of splintering wood and iron and the shock that would fling us 50 feet out of our seats. But we only touched the ground with a sickening thud an inch behind the other machine. And then a wonderful thing happened. We began to slowly pierce the rail and platform in front of us, until the man in it seemed to be almost touching our feet. And at last I saw his face. A wild, dark face with madness in the eyes, and the face of Lord Beadon, as I'd seen a portrait of him in Beadon Hall, made 30 years before. My companion now rose in his seat and began to grapple with his own likeness. He seemed to be only clutching at air, and neither the car nor the occupant appeared to have any tangible substance. Steadily and silently, we bored our way clean through this machine, inch by inch, foot by foot, through the blazing furnace, through the framework of the boiler, through bolt and bar and stanchion, through whirring flywheel and pulsing shaft and piston, until there was nothing beyond us but the dip of the white road. And looking back, I saw the whole dark mass running behind our back wheels. Now, Lord Beadon was still standing and tearing at the air with his fingers. Our car was running on now without guidance. I sprang to the steering wheel and reversed the lever, but it was too late. We struck something at the side of the road, and the whole machine made a leap from the ground. There was a rush of air, an awful shock and crash, and then darkness. A week afterwards, when I was in the hospital, they told me that Lord Beadon was dead. He'd fallen apparently on a large piece of scrap iron by the roadside, and nearly every bone in his body had been broken. I myself, they told me, had had a miraculous escape by falling into a thick clump of gorse, and had got off with a broken arm and a dislocated collarbone. But I was still not able to get out and about for another 2 months. Now, I told no one anything of what had happened, and the accident required but little explanation. Motor car accidents are common enough, especially on slopes like that of the Stour Valley. When I was able to get about again, however, I visited the scene of the disaster. A friend of mine, one of the doctors at the county lunatic asylum, called for me and drove me over to the place. The smash had occurred nearly halfway down the hillside, close to a ruined shed. The ground was covered in gorse and bracken, but here and there, huge pieces of rusty iron were scattered about. Some of them were sharp and brown and ugly, but many were just overgrown with creeping convolvulus. They looked as if they'd once been parts of some great machine. Yeah, it's a curious coincidence, said my companion as we drove away from the place. What's that? I said. Well, I've been told, he continued, that 30 years ago, this old shed was used by the late Earl's elder brother. He was a bit of a mechanical genius, apparently, and they say that his efforts to work out some particular invention in a practical form eventually drove him off his head. He was allowed to keep this place as a workshop, and under the supervision of 2 keepers, he worked on his invention till the day of his death. It was thought that perhaps he might recover his reason if he ever did accomplish his task, but in some mysterious way, his plans were stolen from him on no fewer than 3 occasions, and after the 3rd time, the poor fellow lost heart and destroyed himself. I've heard it whispered that, well, one of my colleagues has told me that the late Earl was not altogether ignorant of these thefts. But I suspect that that's only kind of, gossip. All the fragments of iron that you saw lying about, they were parts of his machine. Heaven knows what it was. Well, I did not venture any suggestions on this point out loud, but I think I could have done. Lord Beadon's motor. You know, it would have passed the time between Huntingdon and St Ives in 1890, wouldn't it? On the train. Yeah. No, I think Hope Burland. What did people think? Reminds me of Nigel Neal's. Oh, right. Okay. Oh, there we are. Right. I'd take your word for that. I don't know Nigel Neal's The Road. Is that a film or a play? Or one of his stories. I got a book of Nigel Neal's short stories, which might appear in the Nunkie Arms sometime, in fact. Yeah, I think it's as well as being, you know, quite an exciting story, it's interesting, you know, the excitement of motor car travel in 1901, the great danger it must have felt. You know, I still feel when I'm driving that I'm doing something a bit dangerous. There's another. This just reminded me of another one. I can't remember. Anyway, mad drivers. I think a bit like Aviator, the earliest Aviators. They were, you know, they had to be a little bit nutty to say, "Oh, Mr. Toad." Of course, I don't know when. What date how that compares to Wind in the Willows, but you know, Mr. Toad. There you are, Mr. Toad. Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. That's one by T.C. Rolt. I probably have read that one. But yes, anyway, good. People seem to have enjoyed it, which is good. There's, interesting stories. Some of them are a bit too long to read, I thought, of the Nunkie Arms, but none of them are kind of really longer than, 20 pages. Okay, there we are. The Corner. Okay, all right. I wonder if that's one okay, maybe I've read that one. I'll look that up. So there's one story in here. A lot of the what about these writers here? Rena Ramsey wrote a story called Resurgam. F. Tennyson Jesse, The Railway Carriage. You got W. Jacobs, B.L. Jacko, The White Spectre, 1950. That was, I think, the year that the Strand magazine ceased to exist. Although there is a reiteration of the Strand magazine now, which publishes kind of classic short stories. I bought a copy a couple of years ago because they had a previously undiscovered H.G. Wells story that had been published in that. L.G. Moberly, who wrote a story called Inexplicable in 1917. Yes. Now I have read Mad Trains, yeah. Well, Resurgam means I will rise again. It's kind of it's probably found on gravestones. I don't know. There's one by Edgar Wallace called The Black Gripe. So yeah, Yancey Gerald, The Orchestra of Death. Yeah, I did when I first got this book. I think I read them all, but not all of them have by any means stuck with me. But anyway, we're gonna have as usual, we're gonna have a little break. But when I come back, I will read a story by one of the stars of the Strand magazine, the person perhaps who allowed its great success, and it was a success. It was, I think, the most popular magazine of its kind at the time, and there were several others like it. But it was lucky enough to premiere and carry the adventures of Sherlock Holmes. But there are other stories by Conan Doyle in it. And after the break, I'm going to read one of them. The Strand magazine is available on the internet. Oh, very good. Yeah, it is told a pace that kind of, I think it's well written in that it's the kind of it does match the kind of breathless, rather dangerous excitement of traveling at speed. Ah, yes. Didn't the Strand magazine turn into Men Only? It did. I'd forgotten that. But yeah, it wasn't Men Only that I bought for my my H.G. Wells story. There is now a magazine, right? It's an American publication called the Strand magazine. Strand didn't. Oh dear. But yeah. There's a story. See if in the break anyone can remember. Oh, I read it quite recently, and it's a ghost story. I can't remember who it's by, but it's about the ghost of a guy who crashed his car into the gates of a country house. No, don't ring any bells. And it must be about this period, kind of, early 1900s. All right. I'm just gonna let's all have a quick comfort break. How long has it been going? What time is it? Oh, there we are. Yeah, that's about right. I would tonight like to perform for you one of the great songs of the music hall. But I require your help. When you hear the words, "Let's all go down the Strand," I would like you to respond with, "Have a banana." So when you hear the words, "Let's all go down the Strand," you must say loudly, "Have a banana." Let's have a practice. Let's all go down the Strand. Well, quite good. I could hear everyone clearly apart from Ian Moore in Dublin. I could hardly hear you at all, Ian. So would you now please do it on your own, at the top of your voice, when you hear the words, "Let's all go down the Strand," respond with, "Have a banana." and I'll be listening, Ian. Let's all go down the Strand. Okay. Here we go. One night, half a dozen tourists met together in Trafalgar Square. A fortnight's tour on the continent was planned, and each had his portmanteau in his hand. Down the Rhine, they meant to have a picnic, till Jones said, I must decline. Boys, you be advised by me, stay away from Germany. What's the good of going down the Rhine? Let's all go down the Strand. Let's all go down the Strand. I'll be leader, you can march behind. Come with me and see what we can find. Let's all go down the Strand. Let's, oh, what happy land. That's the place for fun and noise, all among the girls and boys. So let's all go down the Strand. One day, 25 convicts sat in 25 little cells. The bell then sounded ding-a-ding-a-dong. To exercise, the prisoners came along. Burglar Ben explained to Jags the warder, to me, sir, it's very strange. The men are tired of going round, round and round, same old ground. I propose we make a little change. Oh, let's all go down the Strand. Let's all go down the Strand. I'll be leader, you can march behind. Come with me, we'll see what we can find. Let's go all down the Strand. Oh, what a happy land. That's the place for fun and noise, all among the other girls and boys. So let's all go down the Strand. 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 Great crowds gathered round to welcome Shackleton, returning from the pole. The Lord Mayor welcomed all the crew and said, my lads, I've got a treat for you. Come with me, the mansion house awaits you. A banquet shall be supplied. But the tar in grumbling mood said, we don't want any food. Then he turned to Shackleton and sighed, let's all go down the Strand of a banana. Let's all go down the Strand of a banana. I'll be leader, you can march behind. Come with me, we'll see what we can find. Let's all go down the Strand, have a banana. Let's all go down the Strand. That's the place for fun and noise, all among the girls and boys. So let's all go down the Strand. Oh, sorry, that took a bit longer than I thought. All right, so that's right here. Yeah, so the next story is by the golden boy of the Strand magazine, Arthur Conan Doyle. Not Sherlock Holmes. It's one of Conan Doyle's supernatural stories. One of his less well-known ones, I think. But see what you think. It's called The Silver Mirror. January the 3rd. This affair of White and Wotherspoon's accounts is proven to be a very big task. There are 20 thick ledgers to be examined and checked. Who would be a junior partner, eh? However, it is the first big bit of business which has been left entirely in my hands, and so I must justify it. It has to be finished so that lawyers may have the results in time for the trial. Johnson said this morning that I should have to get the last figure out before the 20th of the month. Good Lord. Oh, well, let's have at it then. And if human brain and nerve can stand the strain, I will win out at the other side. It means office work from 10 till 5 and then a second sitting from about 8 in the evening to 1 in the morning. There's certainly drama in an accountant's life. When I find myself in the still early hours while the rest of the world sleeps, hunting through column and column of those missing figures which will turn a respectable alderman into a felon, I understand that it is not such a prosaic profession after all. On Monday, I came across the first trace of defalcation. No heavy game hunter ever got a finer thrill when first he caught the trail of his quarry. But I look at the 20 ledgers now, and I think of the jungle to which I'll have to follow him before I get my kill. Hard work, certainly, but rare sport too. I saw the fat fellow once at a city dinner, his red face glowing above a white napkin. He looked at the pale little man at the end of the table. I mean, he would have been pale too if he could have seen the task that would be mine. January the 6th. Oh, gosh, what perfect nonsense it is for doctors to prescribe rest when rest is simply out of the question. They are asses. You know, they might as well shout to a man who has a pack of wolves at his heels that what he wants is absolute quiet. My figures must be out by a certain date. Unless they are so, I shall lose the chance of my lifetime. So how on earth, doctor, can I rest? I'll take a week off after the trial. I mean, perhaps I was a fool to go to the doctor at all, but, you know, I do get nervous and highly strung when I sit alone on my work at night. It's not pain, it's a sort of fullness of the head with an occasional mist over the eyes. I thought perhaps some bromide or chloral or something of that kind might do me good, but stop work? No. Sorry, it's absurd to even ask that. You know, this is like a long distance race, you see. You feel queer at first and your heart thumps and your lungs pant, but if you have only the pluck to keep on, you get your second wind. No, I will stick to my work and wait for my second wind. If it never comes, all the same, I'm going to stick to my work. 2 ledgers are already done, and I'm well on in the 3rd. Now, that rascal has covered his tracks well, but I will pick them up for all that. January the 9th. I hadn't meant to go to the doctor again, and yet I'm afraid I've had to. You're straining your nerves, he said, of course, risking a complete breakdown, even endangering your sanity. Now, that's a nice thing to hear from a doctor, isn't it? Well, I will stand the strain and I will take that risk. So long as I can sit in my chair and move a pen, I will follow this old sinner's trail. By the way, I might as well set down here the queer experience which drove me the second time to the doctor. I'm going to keep an exact record of my symptoms and sensations because I suppose they're interesting in themselves. A curious psychophysiological study, said the doctor. And also, actually, because I'm perfectly certain that when I'm through with them, they all seem blurred and unreal, like some queer dream betwixt sleeping and waking. So now, while they're fresh, I'll make a note of them, if only as a change of thought after all those endless figures. So there is an old silver-framed mirror in my room. It was given to me by a friend who had a taste for antiquities, and he, as I happen to know, picked it up at a sale and had no notion where it came from. It's a large thing, 3 feet across and 2 feet high, and it leans at the back of a side table on my left as I write. The frame is flat, it's about 3 inches across, and it's very, very old because the hallmarks and other methods of determining age have been quite worn away. The glass part projects with a beveled edge and has the magnificent reflecting power, which is only, it seems to me, to be found in very old mirrors. There's a feeling of perspective when you look into it, such as no modern glass can ever give. The mirror is so situated that as I sit at the table, I can usually see nothing in it but the reflection of the red window curtains. But last night, a queer thing happened. I'd been working for some hours, very much against the grain, with continual bouts of that mistiness of which I've already complained. And then again and again, I had to stop and clear my eyes. Well, on one of these occasions, I chanced to look at the mirror, and it had the oddest appearance. The red curtains, which should have been reflected in it, were no longer there, but the glass seemed to be clouded and steamy, not on the surface, which glittered like steel, but deep down in the very grain of it. I mean, this opacity, when I stared hard at it, appeared to slowly rotate this way and that until it was a thick white cloud, swirling in heavy wreaths. I mean, so real and solid was it, and so reasonable was I, that I remember turning with the idea that perhaps the curtains might be on fire. But no, everything was deadly still in the room. No sound save the ticking of the clock, no movement save the slow gyration of that strange woolly cloud deep in the heart of the mirror. And then as I looked, the mist or smoke or cloud, or whatever one might call it, seemed to coalesce and solidify at 2 points quite close together. And I was suddenly aware, with a thrill of interest rather than of fear, that these were 2 eyes looking out into the room. I mean, a vague outline of a head I could see, a woman's by the hair, but it was very shadowy. Only these eyes, they were quite distinct. And such eyes they were. Dark, luminous, filled with some passionate emotion, fury or horror. I couldn't tell which, but never have I seen eyes which are so full of intense, vivid life. They were not fixed upon me, but they stared out into the room. And then, as I sat erect, I passed my hand over my brow and made a strong conscious effort to pull myself together. The dim head faded into the general opacity. The mirror slowly cleared. And once more, I was looking at my red curtains. Now, a skeptic would say, no doubt, that I had fallen asleep over my figures and that my experience was a dream. As a matter of fact, I was never more vividly awake in my life. I mean, I was able to argue about it even as I looked at it, and to tell myself that it was a subjective impression, a chimera of nerves begotten by worry and insomnia. You see, why this particular shape? And who was that woman? And what was the dreadful emotion that I could read in those beautiful brown eyes? God, they come between me and my work. For the first time, I've done less than the daily tally which I'd marked out, and perhaps that is why I've had no abnormal sensations tonight. No, tomorrow I must wake up, come what may. January the 11th. All is well and good progress with my work today. I wind the net coil by coil around that bulky body. But the last smile may remain with him if my own nerves break over it. The mirror would seem to be a sort of barometer which marks my brain pressure, because each night I've observed that it had clouded before I had reached the end of my task. Dr. Sinclair, who it turns out is a bit of a psychologist, was so interested in my account that he came round this evening to have a look at the mirror himself. I had observed already that something was scribbled in crabbed old characters upon the metalwork at the back. And Dr. Sinclair examined this more closely with a lens, although he couldn't make much of it. Sank X Pal, SANC, letter X, PAL, was his final reading of it, but that really did not tell us very much. He advised me to put the mirror away into another room. But after all, whatever am I seeing it? It is, by his own account, it's only a symptom. You know, it's in the cause that the danger lies. The 20 ledgers in front of me, not the silver mirror, should be packed away. If only I could do it. But I'm at the 8th now, and so I'm making progress. January the 13th. Oh, gosh. Perhaps it would have been wiser, after all, if I had packed the mirror away. I had the most extraordinary experience with it last night. And yet, you see, I find it so interesting, so fascinating, that even now I'm going to keep it in its place. I just don't know what on earth it all means. I suppose that it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was closing my books in preparation for staggering to bed, when I saw her there in front of me. Now, the stage of mistiness and development must have passed unobserved this time, because there she was in all her beauty and passion and distress, as clear-cut as if she were really in the flesh before me. Her figure was small but very distinct, so much so that every feature, every detail of her dress stamped in my memory. She's seated at the extreme edge of the mirror. A sort of shadowy figure crouches down beside her. I can dimly discern that this is a man. And then behind them is a cloud in which I see figures. They're figures that move. Oh, yes, this is not a mere picture upon which I look. No, this is a scene in life. This is an actual episode. She crouches and quivers. The man beside her cowers down. These vague figures make some abrupt movements and gestures. I mean, all my fears were swallowed up in my interest. It was maddening to see so much and to not see more. But I can at least describe the woman to the smallest point. She's very beautiful and quite young. I mean, not more than 25, I should judge. Her hair is of a very rich brown with a warm chestnut shade, fining into gold at the edges. A little flat pointed cap comes to an angle in front and is made of lace edged with pearls. The forehead is high. Perhaps it's too high for perfect beauty, but you wouldn't have it any other way, because it gives us a touch of power and strength that would otherwise be a softly feminine face. The brows very delicately curved over heavy eyelids, and then come those wonderful eyes, so large and dark, and so full of overmastering emotion, rage and horror contending with the pride of self-control which holds her from sheer frenzy. Cheeks are pale, the lips white with agony, the chin and throat most exquisitely rounded. She sits and leans forward in the chair, straining and rigid, cataleptic with horror. Her dress is black velvet, a jewel gleams like a flame at the breast, and a golden crucifix smoulders in the shadow of a fold. That is the lady whose image lives in the old silver mirror. I mean, what dire need could it be which has left its impress there, so that now, in another age, if the spirit of a man be but worn down to it, he may be conscious of its presence? There's one other detail. On the left side of the skirt of the black dress was, as I thought at first, a shapeless bunch of white ribbon. And then, as I looked more intently, or as the vision defined itself more clearly, I perceived exactly what it was. It was the hand of a man, clenched and knotted in agony, which held on with a convulsive grasp to the fold of her dress. Now, the rest of this crouching figure was a mere vague outline, but that strenuous hand shone clear out of the dark background. with a sinister suggestion of tragedy in its frantic touch. I mean, the man is frightened. He's horribly frightened. I mean, that is obvious, but I mean, what has terrified him so? I mean, why is he gripping the woman's dress? The answer lies among those moving figures in the background. I'm sure of that they have brought danger both to him and to her. I mean, God, the interest of this thing fascinated me. I thought no more of its relation to my own nerves. I just stared and stared like I was in a theatre. But I got no further than that. The mist thinned. There were tumultuous movements in which all the figures were vaguely concerned. And then the mirror was clear once again. The doctor says that I must stop work for a day, and in fact I can now afford to do so because I've made good progress lately. I mean, it is quite evident that the visions depend entirely upon my own nervous state, because I sat in front of the mirror for an hour tonight and there was no result whatever. You know, my soothing day had chased all those figures away. I wonder in fact whether I shall ever penetrate what they all mean. I examined the mirror this evening under a good light, and besides that mysterious inscription, Sank Ex Pal, I was able to discern some signs of what looked like heraldic marks, very faintly visible upon the silver. They must be very old, I thought, because they were almost obliterated. So far as I could make out, they represented 3 spearheads, 2 above and 1 below. Yeah. I'll show them to Dr. Sinclair when he comes round tomorrow. January the 14th. I'm feeling perfectly well again, and I intend that nothing else shall stop me until my task is finished. The doctor was shown the marks on the mirror, and he agreed that they looked like armorial bearings. He's very interested in all that I've told him, and he cross-questioned me closely on the details. It amuses me to notice how he is torn by these 2 conflicting desires. The one, that his patient should lose his symptoms, and the other, that the medium, because I mean that is how he regards me, should solve this mystery of the past. He advised continual rest, but he didn't oppose me too violently when I declared that such a thing was out of the question at that time until the 10 remaining ledgers had all been carefully checked. January the 17th. For 3 nights, I've had no experiences. My day of rest has borne fruit. Only a quarter of my task is now left, but I must make a forced march now because the lawyers are clamouring for their material. I'll give them enough and to spare because I have him fast on 100 counts. When they realise what a slippery, cunning rascal this man is, I think I will gain some credit from the case. False trading accounts, false balance sheets, dividends drawn from capital, losses written down as profits, suppression of working expenses, manipulation of petty cash. Oh, yes. No, this gentleman has a fine record. January the 18th. Headaches, nervous twitches, mistiness, fullness of the temples, all the premonitions of trouble, I'm afraid. And the trouble came, sure enough. And yet, see, my real sorrow is not so much that the vision should come, as that it should have ceased before all is revealed. But I saw more tonight than ever. The crouching man was as visible as the lady whose gown he clutched. He's a little swarthy man with a black pointed beard. He has a loose gown of damask trimmed with fur. The prevailing tints of his dress are red. But gosh, what a fright the fellow is in. You know, he cowers and shivers and glares back over his shoulder. There's a small knife in his other hand, but he's far too tremulous and cowed to use it. I mean, dimly now I begin to see the figures in the background. Fierce faces, bearded and dark, shape themselves out of the mist. There's one terrible creature, a skeleton of a man with hollow cheeks and eyes sunk in his head, and he also has a knife in his hand. On the right of the woman, I can see now, stands a tall man, very young, with flaxen hair, his face sullen and dour. The beautiful woman looks up at him in appeal, and so does the man on the ground. The youth seems to be, in fact, the arbiter of their fate. The crouching man draws closer and hides himself in the woman's skirts. The tall youth bends down now and tries to drag her away from him. That is what I saw last night, before the mirror cleared. Will I ever know what it leads to and whence it all comes? No, this is not mere imagination. Of that I'm absolutely certain. Somewhere, sometime, this scene has been enacted and this old mirror has reflected it. But when? And where? January the 20th. My work draws to a close and it is time. I feel a tenseness within my brain, a sense of intolerable strain which warns me that something is going to give. I have worked myself to the limit, but tonight should be the last night. With a supreme effort, I will finish the final ledger and complete the case before I rise from my chair. I will do it. I will do it. February the 7th. I did it. But my God, what an experience. I hardly know if I'm strong enough to set it down now. Let me explain in the first instance that I'm writing this in Dr. Sinclair's private hospital some 3 weeks after the last entry in my diary. On the night of January the 20th, my nervous system finally gave way, and I remember nothing afterwards until I found myself 3 days ago in this home of rest. And I can rest now in good conscience because my work was done before I went under. My figures are in the solicitor's hands. The hunt is over. And I must now describe that night. Well, I'd sworn to finish my work and I intently stuck it out, although my head was bursting. And I decided that I would never look up until the last column had been added. And gosh, this was fine self-restraint, because all the time I knew that wonderful things were happening in that mirror. Every nerve in my body told me that it was the case. And if I looked up, that was an end to my work. So I didn't look up until I was finished. And then at last, with throbbing temples, I threw down my pen, I raised my eyes. Oh, and what a sight there was. The mirror in its silver frame, it was now like a stage, brilliantly lit, in which a drama was in progress. There was no mist now. The oppression of my nerves had wrought this amazing clarity. Every feature, every movement was clear-cut as in life. To think that I, a tired accountant, the most prosaic of mankind, with the account books of a swindling bankrupt before me, should be chosen of all the human race to look upon this scene. It was the same scene as before, and the same figures, but the drama had advanced to a different stage. The tall young man was now holding the woman in his arms. She strained away from him and looked up at him with loathing in her face. They'd torn the crouching man away from his hold upon the skirt of her dress. A dozen of them now were around him. They were savage, bearded men, and they were hacking at him with knives. They all seemed to strike him together. Their arms rose and fell, and the blood did not flow from him. It squirted. His red dress was dabbled in it. He threw himself this way and that, purple upon crimson, like an overripe plum. And still these men hacked away, and still the jets shot out of him. It was horrible. Horrible. They dragged him kicking to the floor. The woman looked over her shoulder and her mouth gaped. Now, I couldn't hear anything, of course, but I knew that she was screaming at the top of her lungs. And then, whether it was this nerve-wracking vision before me, or whether, because my task was finished, all the overwork of the past weeks came in one crashing weight upon me. The room danced around me. The floor seemed to sink away beneath my feet, and I remember nothing more. In the morning, apparently, my landlady found me stretched senseless in front of the silver mirror. But of course, I knew nothing of that until 3 days ago, when I woke in the deep pace of the doctor's nursing home. February the 9th. I've only just now told Dr. Sinclair my full experience. He'd not allowed me to speak of these matters before, and he listened with absorbed interest. Now, you don't identify this with any well-known scene in history? He asked, and he had suspicion in his eyes. Well, I assured him that I knew nothing of history. And you've no idea whence that mirror came and to whom it belonged. Well, have you? I asked him, because he seemed to speak with meaning. Well, he said, it's incredible, of course, and yet how else can one explain it? The scenes which you described before suggested it, but now, well, it has gone beyond all range of coincidence. I will bring you some notes in the evening. Later. He's just left me. Let me set down his words as closely as I can recall them. He began by laying several musty volumes on my bed. You can consult these at your leisure, he said. I have some notes here which you can confirm. There is not a doubt, he said, that what you have seen is the murder of Rizzio by the Scottish nobles in the presence of Mary, which occurred in March 1566. Your description of the woman is uncannily accurate. The high forehead and heavy lids, combined with great beauty, could hardly apply to another woman. The tall young man was her husband, Darnley. Rizzio, the chronicle tells us, was dressed in a loose dressing gown of furred damask with hose of russet velvet. With one hand, he clutched Mary's gown. With the other, he held a dagger. Your fierce, hollow-eyed man was Ruthven, who was new risen from a bed of sickness. My friend, every detail is exact. But why me? I asked in bewilderment. I mean, why of all the human race was this shown to me? Well, said the doctor, because you were in the fit mental state to receive the impression, because you chanced to own the mirror which gave the impression. What? The mirror? So you think then that that was Mary's mirror? That stood in the room where the deed was done? Oh, I'm convinced that it was Mary's mirror. She had been Queen of France. Her personal property would be stamped with the royal arms. What you took to be 3 spearheads were really the lilies of France. And what about the inscription? Sanc ex pal. Well, you could expand that into Sancti Crucis Palatium. Someone has made a note upon the mirror as whence it came. It was the Palace of the Holy Cross. Holyrood, I said. Exactly. Your mirror came from Holyrood. You have had a very singular experience, my friend, and you have escaped. I trust that you will never put yourself into the way of having such another. I'm going to all give you a few moments to Google Rizzio, because it is a story that unfortunately requires footnotes. Anyway, there's a Wikipedia entry about Rizzio, Rizzio, and Mary, Queen of Scots. Yeah. So, does anyone know? Did anyone understand who Rizzio was? He was a guy who was considered to have gotten too close to Mary, Queen of Scots, and was therefore murdered by the Scottish nobleman. But oh, you do know? Okay, maybe it's well known. Oh, there we are. Okay, so people know. I had no idea of it. There we are. Maybe it was well known. Oh, okay. If you don't know who he was, I slightly lessens the impact. Oh, okay, there we are. So there we are. People know it. Oh, well, that's good. Okay. Yeah. Oh, there we are. I was worried about nothing. Gosh. You've talked about it in high school. Okay. Well, anyone there who felt a bit shortchanged because they'd never heard of Rizzio, I was in your position when I first read that story. Gosh, it must be a well-known thing. All right. Yeah. Now, Emery says, has anyone seen the portrait of Mary looks like Dennis Waterman? I've seen a few portraits of her, and I must say, extreme beauty was not the description I'd have used. Yeah. There we are. Good. Thank you, Anthony. Good. There's going to be a lock-in for people who have not heard of Rizzio at the end of the evening. We're going to crack open some wine and talk about how we haven't wasted our time. Listen, I'm just going to, if you've got other things to do, feel free. I'm just going to be back in a sec, just going to get another drink. There we are. Whenever you stayed. Yeah, the haunted mirrors, I think, occurs. I think it's a bit of a trope. So I need to find something to open this beer. There's a oh look, he was blown up. All right, there's a lot of Darnley talk here. Ah. Yes. So that's all from the Strand. But I just here we are. I read a lot of short stories, and of late I haven't read many novels, and I don't know that it's just kind of, my ability to read something long has kind of, I don't know, faded somewhat. But I mean, I'm reading a novel at the moment which I'm enjoying very much, and it was recommended to me by someone on Facebook. I don't know whether he tunes into the Nunkie Arms. Carl Taylor. Is Carl Taylor out there by any chance? Anyway, this book I'd never heard of before, and Carl Taylor wrote on Facebook that you don't read many great novels, but this is a great novel. And well, I'm halfway through it, and I'm inclined to agree with him. It's called Am Jonathan Scrivener by Claude Horton, and it's published by Valancourt Books. Now, if you haven't heard of Valancourt Books, go to their website. They're brilliant. They're an American-based publisher, but they publish forgotten novels from the kind of, I guess, kind of between the wars. Kind of. This is from the 1930s, and in it, I'm not going to try and précis it because it's a mysterious, vaguely mystical, I think, novel. It's a mystery, but there's a brilliant description of a pub, which I wanted to read to you. Oh no, I need to somehow find the page. So talk among yourselves for a moment. I think I got it on my phone. God, everyone knows so much about Rizzio. There we are. I feel a bit embarrassed then. There we are, got it. So I'm going to read to you now a description of a pub from the narrator of this novel has been employed by a mysterious man called Jonathan Scrivener to be his secretary. What we know about Jonathan Scrivener is that he obviously has large amounts of spare cash, and he lives in this flat in Mayfair, which the narrator, who comes from a humble background, is occupying. And various friends of Jonathan Scrivener call in, and there are various conversations with these friends. And one of them is a guy called Andrew Middleton, who is an alcoholic. He served in the First World War. He's been betrayed by his sweetheart, and he's become a disillusioned alcoholic. And I'm going to read you just the description of the pub that they go to. I saw much of Middleton during this period, but the library soon ceased to be our background. He began to drink more and more seriously, and gradually he drifted to others who did the same. "Come out with me," he used to say. "You've sat long enough with those damn books. Come and see where I spend my time when I'm not here. I only care about people like myself nowadays, men and women who've fallen out of the disciplined army which marches monotonously down the high road, determined to believe that it's on its way to somewhere. Yeah, I'm only interested now in what I call the failures. I drink with them. I listen to them. I study them. Or I would study them if I didn't get so damn drunk. Come on, come with me now and have a look at them." And I used to go with him. When he'd been drinking, he was amazingly talkative and often quite interesting. When he was sober, he'd sit silent and stare at his shoes with angry eyes. He took me to out-of-the-way pubs which seemed to depend entirely upon their own customers. There was little or no chance trade. I visited one of these very often at Middleton. It was in a blind alley and was in reality a small hotel. Several of the men we met in the bar had rooms upstairs and apparently drank the whole time that they were awake. On our first visit, Middleton informed me that they were a bohemian bunch. And then he added, you know the type, old lyric writers who can't get a job, theatrical hacks, dramatic critics on some wretched tuppenny weekly of a sporting nature. One of the barmaids told me all about them a month ago. I know most of them now. Dud serial writers, poster artists who are successful ones who can now do nothing but drink. God in heaven knows where they get their money from. Well, Middleton's description was accurate enough. He introduced me to a curious assortment of derelicts. There's no room in the modern world for the old-time bohemians. Success today demands discipline, but these men were incapable of adjustment to the new regime. Their conversation consisted entirely of reminiscences, anecdotes, and pathetic boasting about the golden glory which will be theirs tomorrow, or the day after, or at the very least next month. There was conspiracy to regard themselves as the wits of the town and the possessors of great influence in the theatrical world. And yet they were lovable, amusing, and generous to the pitch of genius. They were like a pack of lost dogs, each of which pretended to have a good home. Listening to them, the electric light seemed an anachronism. There should have been flaring gas jets. When one left them, one should have encountered hansoms and horse buses in the streets, not taxis and motor cars. They always addressed each other as old boy or old man, and there were usually 2 or 3 geniuses present. I never went into the bar without seeing a man who looked like a degenerate Mr. Punch. He was a drama critic to a gutter sporting weekly entitled They're Off. Now, to watch him drink whiskey after whiskey, hour after hour, was to know fear. I wondered how the barmaid dared to serve him. But you see, I never saw him drunk. He became absolutely motionless, and the expression in his eyes became more and more fixed. That was all. He was a man of principle, however, and on countless occasions I heard him say, I made up my mind when I became a drama critic that I would never write for the stage. Never. And I never have, and I never will. After this announcement, he would turn his head very slowly and look intently at each of his listeners in turn. There was another habitué of the place, a small man who never wore an overcoat and always had a bowler hat on the back of his head. He had a grey moustache into which he always spoke, and a permanent smile frozen on his lips. Long years ago, he'd had a hand in several successful musical comedies. Very occasionally, nowadays, he got a job writing gags for a comedian. Under their glaze, these eyes, they seemed intelligent, and he was very gentle in his movements and scrupulously polite. He objected strongly if anyone addressed coarse remarks to the barmaids. He had a room upstairs and apparently never ate. He slept from 4 a.m. till midday, and everyone loved him. He explained to me that everything was relative, and he added, give you an example. I have to start the day with 10 drinks in order to get normal. You must be normal, old man. You must be normal. Secret of success is to be normal. He was always talking to you on one side, taking you to one side and saying, tell me, old man, is this funny? And then some nonsense or other would follow. And then he'd say, there's a laugh in that, don't you think? He dealt in laughs, but he had a philosophy, and a remarkably simple one. And it was this. There was one essential in life: to possess a top hat. You could never quite go under if you owned a top hat. Apparently, he had not possessed a top hat for some years. There were a few tables around the walls of the room, occupied generally by couples. Usually at one of them, there was a man with a big head who leaned forward heavily. His name was familiar to me, and he always had a large, blousy woman with him. An interminable argument was invariably in progress between these two. The theme of this argument never varied. At 8 o'clock, the woman said that they ought to go, and they argued until 1 a.m. as to whether they should go or not. When he wanted a drink, he banged on the table with his stick. On the rare occasions when he lurched over to the bar, he was treated with immense respect by everybody. He looked from face to face with great haunted eyes, as if he were forced to seek someone of whom he was afraid. Drinking in this pub was not restricted to the sessions imposed by law, since residents could drink all night if they chose, and evidently it was this fact which induced a number of men to make their place their headquarters. The bar was shut at closing time, and thereafter drinks were obtained from the night porter. I never discovered who owned the place, but it must have been worth a fortune. Well, what do you think of it? Middleton asked me during my third visit. He didn't wait for my reply, but he went on. I like these fellows, you know. Yeah, I like them. A year ago, I'd have called them a pack of wasters, but that's just a phrase. He was fairly intoxicated, and after a brief pause, he went on. These fellows, they haven't gone to the devil because they're weaker than the normal, respectable type, you know. No, not a bit of it. They're stronger. I told him that was an interesting theory, and so he developed it. Of course they're stronger. Everyone else is so lacking in vitality that they can't live without a dream. These fellows demand a dream. They can't live without it. This world refuses them one, so they create an artificial one. They're in revolt and they don't know it, but they are. Every one of them would rather go mad than become a machine. He gave his short staccato laugh and then said, there's more real faith in the pubs than there is in the churches. Not that that is saying much. I'm enjoying this book very much. I recommend it to you. So what have we got? I think they sound like pub denizens today. Yeah, Patrick, very good. Arthur Machen meets Patrick Hamilton, very good. Yeah. Patrick Hamilton. Again, I remember years ago reading that and having a rather similar reaction. I'd suggest that this story is perhaps a mix between not Arthur Machen and Patrick Hamilton, but Patrick Hamilton and perhaps G.K. Chesterton. This book reminds me a bit of The Man Who Was Thursday. Not really because it's formal plot or anything like all the characters, but just because there's this kind of mystical mystery, this religious mystery, in a sense, hovering over it. So there we are. Oh, hey, we've gone on a bit longer than Nunkie Arms usually does, but that's all right. I'll have to read that one. So Emma, we'll have E2 read out that one. I think you've been to that pub. Anyway, that pub is, I think it's like the Nunkie Arms. I think, a group of outcasts from society getting together and just enjoying each other's company. It's written 1930s, Dominic. Oh, hello, Dwayne. Are you a newcomer? You're very welcome. So there we are, Nunkie Arms. Nearly 2 years old. I was looking back through the old recordings on YouTube, and I think that the first Nunkie Arms was 20th of March 2021. And then it wasn't yet called the Nunkie Arms, it was called Randomly Chosen Beer-Fueled Story. And I can't remember what the story was. I think it might have been an Arthur Machen story. So anyway, we seem to have a few more tonight than usual, which is very pleasing to see. So I'm off the road at the moment. I did my last live performance last weekend, and so I'm kind of, yeah. But therefore, I think I'll be doing maybe a bit more live broadcasts like this. Oh, but 24th of March is Abney Day, and there'll be a live broadcast of Lost Hearts by M.R. James. And you need to register for that. It's pay what you can, but you'll find a link on Facebook or wherever else you heard about this. Yeah, the name of the book is I Am Jonathan Scrivener, and the author is Claude Horton. And the publisher is Valancourt Books. Seriously worth looking at their website. Oh yeah, Dwayne. So there is no story. That problem is there is no story. Everyone always asks me that. There's no story, or what story there is has been told too often. Yeah. Dead. Oh, Dead Right Murder Mysteries. Yeah. Well, that's my dad runs or used to run a kind of it was like murder nights where you'd have dinner and actors would perform act in front of you and you had to work out who the murderer was. I can't remember what the name for the genre is, but yeah, no, my dad ran those in Southport. He wrote many scripts. Very good. Oh, Belinda, do watch it from the hotel in Ireland, because of course there's a reference to the great horror of Dublin, the vaults of St Michan's Church. Pay a visit to the vaults on Abney Day. Ah, that'd be amazing. Okay. Yeah. Good. So the Nunkie Arms, yeah. It'll be back. I might do something special for the coronation. I was wondering about the King in Yellow, but I'm not sure whether that's not a bit long. But I think there'll be a Nunkie Arms coronation special, but there'll probably be others before that as well. There'll be something, maybe something around about Easter or before Easter. Ah, yeah, Dwayne, the Horse Hostel. I would love to return. It was a great venue. Problem is, it's quite expensive to hire. Um, so I'm not sure. We'll see. We'll see. Yeah. Ian, I've not seen the yellow sign. No. Is this a film based upon the King in Yellow? Yeah, it's not just London prices, Dwayne. The Horse Hospital is under. It's a great shame because the people have occupied. They've been there for 30 years, probably more, and the owners of the building, in fact, the muse in which it is, have suddenly. I think they've changed their mind, and are kind of suddenly having charged them a peppercorn rent for all those years, and now demanding the kind of rent that one would pay for a building of that kind in Bloomsbury. And of course, they can't afford it. It can only be afforded by a rich corporation or individual. So I don't blame them. They need to kind of make up as much as they can. They're constantly facing eviction. So I would like to go about there as much as anything to support them. The Horse Hospital, go again. Sorry, go. If you've never heard of it, go. They have art exhibitions there, but they also have interesting talks. There's a thing called the Miskatonic Institute, which kind of they organise lectures about weird literature. Oh, I didn't know that, Rick. That's interesting. Oh yeah. Oh, I know Ribchester. Oh right, okay. Oh, that would be good. I'm not so far from Ribchester. Yeah, well, Emma send me the details of Stoke. As I say, in Stafford, I had a perfectly polite disagreement with the manager of that venue because they were making contractual demands that I couldn't stomach. I'm afraid. Yeah, no, it's worth a visit to the horse hospital. It's literally a horse hospital. It was where London cabbies took their sick horses to be mended in the 19th century. It's you know it's there's not much to see, to be honest. Um, just behind Great Ormond Street Hospital and the is it called the Russell Hotel? That massive red brick hotel on Russell Square. Yeah. Well, listen, if you have any of these ideas for venues, by all means, email them to me. Thing is, it does require that the people there make some effort into publicising the event themselves. Um, Rarely do I kind of actually hire a place myself, unless I mean the horse hospital I did because that was a special occasion. I kind of gave myself months to kind of prepare and publicise it. But yeah, well, the Bishop's Nest in Sheffield, I'm sure it's lovely, but and museum, I'm sure the museum's great, but it would require them really having the enthusiasm um, to publicise it themselves. Whereas a theatre, it's part of their job to publicise it. So that's good. I did. Matt, I used to perform at the Garage in Lichfield, and I think that is run by the same people who now run Stafford. And for the same reasons, I just I felt that I wasn't. I mean, there was nothing sinister about it. I just thought that they kind of made certain demands that were non-negotiable, and I got annoyed and didn't like these demands. So yeah, right. Okay, well we're at 152. Let's yeah, 2-year birthday party. Let's break the 2-hour barrier for the Nunkie Arms. Go on. Yeah, Square Chapel, Halifax again, Catherine. It's kind of I've a change of management that they're less responsive to my emails than they were. Um, yes, I'll be back at the Lowry. I will. I'll be back at the Lowry at Halloween with a new show, with the new MR James show. So yeah, so that's it. Yeah, 28th, 27th, I think Friday, 27th of October, the Lowry, um, with a new show called Gravest Fears, which is MR James Ghost Stories, Barchester Cathedral, and the episode and an episode of Cathedral History. So that's what I'll be spending a lot of my downtime doing is learning those stories. But I shall reveal that information to the world at a later date. Yeah, yeah. Well, Rifford, I absolutely, I'd love to perform in any of those towns, but it requires finding a venue that will program me. I couldn't just hire a hall in Ludlow because I don't know anyone in Ludlow, and it needs people with some kind of marketing oomph behind them for me to do a performance there. So if there's a theatre in Ludlow and they program me, then that's great, and I'll have a look. But I've yet to go to any of those places. Yes, Rick, I'll be at the Portico again in December. Yeah. Oh yeah, no, I'm going to the Conti in Preston. Yeah, yeah. I have a regular slot there. Yeah. So there's a new biography of M.R. James coming out by he's a professor at Trinity Dublin, called Darryl Jones. He's a Welshman, but he's at Trinity Dublin, and I think that'll be a major event when that comes out. I'm not sure whether Mark, do you know, is there any kind of date for it? I did bump into him a few months ago in Cambridge, and he was still kind of researching it then. The pub in Holborn. Was it the one? Crikey, what's it called? Yeah. Oh, crikey, what's it called? Anyway, yes, Casey. I think yes, I might be back there. I wish I could remember the name of the pub. What was it called? The Rugby Tavern. It was the Rugby Tavern, I think. Just near Gray's Inn Road, near Coram Fields. Is that right? He's still writing it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, it'll be good when that comes out. Yes. No. Well, the Rugby Tavern. I kind of since lockdowns, I have been back there once, I think. But I will be back there again. Problem is, I'm not living very near London now, so I don't make it to London that often. Yeah, the Embankment one. Apparently, the Devereux, it was going to shut down, but apparently it has reopened. But I think as a kind of wine bar sort of place. So I'm not sure whether they would be amenable. But that was a pub that had been frequented by G.K. Chesterton, and the last thing I did there was about a week before they shut, and they let me take a bin bag full of their G.K. Chesterton books that they had on display. So I got quite a good G.K. Chesterton library as a result of that. But a Nunkie Arms live tour. This is in my notes, things to do with a question mark at the end. So it'd be the Nunkie Arms, but in an actual pub. And I'm thinking I could maybe pull it off in Manchester, London. More suburb queer trades. Yeah, well, I think the ones I've done are the. Yeah, I mean, I greatly enjoy them. So yeah, maybe. I think I've done the kind of the most obvious ones though. Well, Sheffield, yeah, no, Sheffield. You see, because whenever I do shows in Sheffield, I get a lot of people, but it'll be kind of Sheffield actually. Steve or was it Frank also in Sheffield? If you know a pub with a function room or a quiet part of it, then let me know because that would be a good place. Yeah, Leeds. Okay. Leeds or York, perhaps. I did a show in a really nice pub in York last autumn. The Swan, I think. Very ancient historical pub, which had a lovely room upstairs. Yeah, York, exactly. York might be good. Okay. Yeah. There's another new show that I'll be touring in a small way called The Archive of Dread, which is a bit Nunkie Arms like in its format, in that it's two tales divided by an interval. Yeah, well, Angie, I'll be up in Edinburgh in November again with an M.R. James show. It's a bit far for just a pub show. I think maybe, I don't know. I'd love to if I could find another reason to be up there. Okay. We've been on for 1 hour, 59 minutes and 35 seconds. We've got 20 seconds left. Ask me anything. You've got 10 seconds left. Really? There's nothing you want to know? Oh, that's very kind. Okay, we're done. The moment of frankness is over. Thank you, everybody. See you again soon.